Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. This is Adventure Van on another adventure here in the state of New Mexico. I'm in the town, or some will refer to as the ghost town of Mogollon. It is spelled Mogollon. The two L's make a Y sound, so Mogollon. So that's where we're at right now. I'm going to walk up the town and kind of point out some structures. It's still populated. There's still a few people that live here, work here. Unfortunately, we didn't do our homework, and the museum and one other, there's like two little museums that are closed. But let me turn it around as we approach the town, and I'll give you a little bit of history. So the location of this little ghost town is in New Mexico. It's in the southwest area of New Mexico. If you know Gallup from the Route 66 song, Gallup, New Mexico, if you looked at Gallup, you went straight south as the crows fly, you would find it. It was established in the 1870s, and in the 1870s, this was still just known as territory. New Mexico doesn't get statehood until January 6th of 1912. It becomes a 47th state. Following, close behind is Arizona, 48th state on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1912. They were both admitted into the Union as state 47 and 48. The interesting thing about it, before they became a state, the U.S. flag only had 46 stars on it. So when they became a state, the two states got their star on the flag on July 4th of that same year. Following to make it 50 states would be Alaska on January 3rd, 1959. And for a short reason, there would have been a 49-star flag, because in January, the star was added on July 4th of July. So then after Alaska, Hawaii gets admitted in August 21st of 1959, and it wasn't until 1960 that its star was added, July 4th of 1960. Anyways, a little bit of state history there. So following the Mexican independence, which they gained independence from Spain in 1821, approximately 1821. So from 1821 up until 1846, this was all 1821 to 1846. We would be standing on property that was owned or ruled, or whatever you want to call it, by the country of Mexico. Mexico had this territory during that time. So 1821 to 1846, what a handful, 30 something odd years. So then the United States goes to war with Mexico from 1846 to about 1848. And that was the time at the conclusion of the Hidalgo Treaty where the U.S. gained this as its territory, not a state. So we go from 1850s, and what had happened, there was a guy that was in the military. So now this is territory of the United States. So in 1870s, there was a sergeant in the United States military, Sergeant James Cooney, and while he was in the service, he came up here and discovered gold. While still in uniform, while still serving, he doesn't mention it to anybody. So when he gets discharged, he comes back here and lays claim on it. Still not a state of the U.S., just a territory. And him and his partner named Henry McAllister end up starting to extract gold. Well, it wasn't too soon after that the Apaches were harassing them, coming in to town, what they were trying to establish, and chased them away. 2 years after that, McAllister and Cooney, they come back in and get a stronger foothold. Also at that time, they other people had known of the mining and the gold, and there was also silver, so they started getting populated. Unfortunately for all those people, the Apaches still didn't like it. So they came through and they massacred a bunch of people, including Cooney. And I was hoping to find the cemetery where his gravestone is at. And here comes the wind. So going back to the name, now I've given you a little bit of the history of how this land had changed ownership from going back as far as Spanish colonialism to Mexico to U.S. So where does it get the name Mogollon? When it was established in 1870 as a territory of the United States, they named it Mogollon because he was a provincial governor of this area under Spanish rule. So that's how it got its name. It was never named that prior to that. It was in 1880 when the raid killed a bunch of people, including the Apache raid killed a bunch of people, including Cooney, who came out here to make millions. Now in 1913, the highest point was in 1913, where they have extracted 1.5 million in gold and silver. At the time, the population just tipped over. It was exceeding 3,000 people that were living here. As you can see, some of the structures, like this one resident, very well kept up. Looks real. I mean, I wouldn't mind living there myself. It looks awesome. That one, these two buildings also look like currently used. This is a theater. Now, as the historians or the history will tell you, this had everything a mining camp would have. You know, it had a general store, restaurants, bars, lodging, hotels, brothels, gambling venues. I would believe that there was probably more structures than this. There was other demise of the town and some of the structures with fires. Some fires burnt a lot of it down up until the, I think, 1950s actually is when it saw its like ultimate decline. And then there was also flooding. I think the last major flood exceeded what you see here, this little creek or river. I think it was in 1913. In 2013, that had risen past these walls. There was so much flooding that it came into the streets. And I guess at the time there were some tourists here. Right now it's just me and the group I came with. There's only 4 of us here. But there were some tourists here and they got stranded here. So between fire and floods, it's really, really declined. Here's a gravity pump. A gas gravity pump is sitting on this porch. And if you guys ever seen, you know, where I volunteer at the historic Route 66 station, we have 2 replicas of these sitting outside our station. And I think I caught the other gas pump that was down there. I don't know of any gas station that ever really existed here. May have. This is quite a windy road to get in here. If you decide to come in, just be very cautious. Oh man. So sorry. Be very cautious of the narrow road. Sometimes you have to pull over to like the pullouts. We encountered a truck on the opposite way and we just kind of had to squeeze by it. I would also try to look in to see if the museums are open, hours of operation. In a small place like this, it might be hit or miss. But it is really cool to come here. I like the idea that it's not like a calico ghost town in California where it's all commercialized and you go in to buy something, everything's made in China or in Mexico. There's not much more to see than some of the signs and the history here, which I do like, but it's a really cool feel. It's a really cool feel of what it must have been like to live out here. We were making some comments that on the way up, you know, when we drove maybe about a half hour off the main road, maybe about a half hour, and just to think that that was once the pathway, the roadway in, and the only way to do it was with horse and wagon. This one here looks like it's still in operation. Stage stop studio. And then this has painted on it where it says general store. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they just painted there for aesthetic purposes. This looks like a pretty, well, there's a mountain bike on there, so I believe that's a still in use structure. And then it was around 1950, in the 1950s, where they actually stopped mining the gold out. And I think silver for a little bit more after that, but it was really in 1950 when the gold was depleted that it just dwindled in population. I don't really want to walk all the way up there, but there's Shot of another cabin. You'll see some of the mining debris in the area as you drive in. One other thing that plagued this area was that quartz dust from the mining and pulling the stuff out of the rocks. They called it quartz dust. Well, they didn't have a lot of, I guess breathing apparatuses or whatnot. But anyways, the quartz dust caused a lot of lung disease, leading up to fatalities. So you had the Apaches that made it rough, made it a rough stop, made it a rough start. You had fires that burned down some of the structures. You had floods throughout the decades, all the way up until 2013, that made it harder to live here and work here and strive. And then when the gold finally was depleted in the 1950s, it turned into somewhat pretty much what you see now. The biggest mine of notoriety that made the most money was called Little Fanny. So I also found some other information as I'm walking that the fires, they had fires continually or off and on from 1904 to World War II era, where the fires were destroying a lot. The historical floods historically were noted from 1894 all the way to 2013. In 1893, the silver dries out in 1893, so I was wrong on that. And then in 1909, the population goes down to 2,000 people. So in 1950s, operations stopped altogether. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll give a couple of links in the description box. The video that I extracted a lot of my information on. One guy does a really good job covering it. I just added some nuances of when states were gaining statehood, when their stars are added to the flag. I find that kind of interesting. One other thing that people don't realize is that California becomes a state in 1850, a year after the 1849 gold rush. Sutter's Mill, you might know that from history. And California didn't have any neighboring states. Everything else around it was territory. And it kind of seemed like as soon as these states were getting some kind of value to the federal government, whether it be gold or silver or another commodity, they were being granted statehood. So there you have it, everybody. A little bit of New Mexico history of Mogollon. Interesting. Look it up online. I'll leave you some links in the description box. If you're ever out in New Mexico, we came in from Silver City today, but if towns like this are in your interest, I definitely put this one on your to-do list. All right, like, subscribe. I'm really enjoying my time out here. Got my my KLR motorcycles back in Silver City. Drove out here today. I'll be heading out, I think, on Sunday. But enjoy, and hope you get some information from it. Bye.